This week, as we're reading Getting to Yes, I want to say a few words about something that Getting to Yes demonstrates very well, and that is models of negotiation. Getting to Yes is a great example of what a model of negotiation looks like. In other words, it's not just a negotiation tip or a set of negotiation tips. It takes negotiation and it portrays it completely, and it breaks it down into different elements that you can look at and provides you with a model to work with. Getting to Yes, of course, isn't the only negotiation model there is out there. Pick up any book on negotiation and you're likely to find that it contains a more comprehensive model. Type negotiation model into Google and you'll find yourself with 21 million hits like I was a few minutes ago. So how do we make sense out of these models, and what use or what's the purpose of having a model are the two things I'd like to address in this talk. So the first question would be, what types of models are there out there? And I think that it's pretty simple to break negotiation models down into two types of models. The first type of model is what I'll call a sequential model. This is a model that runs kind of like a recipe. It tells you, you have all these ingredients, but it focuses on what you do. You prepare, you meet, you open, you offer, you discuss, you counteroffer, and then you reach agreement or counteroffer and start back at the beginning, and then at the bottom of that, you either hit agreement or you hit impasse. So it's a sequence of stages or steps that you take. And there could be 6 steps starting with preparation and ending with agreement, or there could be 12 steps starting with a needs assessment or realizing that you're missing something and ending with monitoring compliance with an agreement. But it's stages or steps one after another. A different type of model, a very different type of model, is a model that is not sequential. It doesn't try to say this is how a negotiation runs chronologically. Rather, what it is it focuses on breaking negotiation down into a set of elements that appear in each and any negotiation process you're here. In other words, an elements-based model focuses on naming items and elements and things that go on in a negotiation so that you can break negotiation down into a bunch of things that you can wrap your mind around. So Getting to Yes, for example, is an elements-based model. Getting to Yes works with 4 elements that are in negotiation. The Harvard negotiation training program, which was developed out of Getting to Yes, was expanded out of Getting to Yes, has 7 elements of negotiation. So it doesn't tell you do this first and do this next. It does say that there are always going to be options. There are always going to be alternatives. There are always going to be interests and positions. And this is how you're supposed to look at negotiation. And there are many, many, many of these going around. I myself, in my thinking about negotiation, my preference is towards the elements-based models and not towards the chronological, sequential type. Because I think that negotiation, particularly interest-based negotiation, it really isn't that linear. Really doesn't go according to steps. Sometimes distributive negotiation, particular positional bargaining, is much more set piece in one after another. Offer, counteroffer, application of power, counter-application of power, offer, counteroffer. Sometimes it's much more set piece. But certainly integrative negotiation processes are much less linear, much more a lot of stuff going on at once, and the element-based models help us understand these things as they go on. At my own negotiation practice, together with my partner Yael Efron, I developed a 10-element model of negotiation, and there is a 3-element model, and there is a 12-element model, and as I've said, there are plenty of them out there. And you can take a look at my own model, which will be linked to below this. But the point is not read my model so that you can enjoy it or use it, any more than telling you to read Getting to Yes is read Getting to Yes and then go out and apply Getting to Yes's model. That's not the point. The point is that once you do some thinking about negotiation, you're going to need to figure out your own model for understanding negotiation. That's what my 10-element model was for me. It was me mapping out negotiation for myself, with my partner, of how we made sense of negotiation. And you're going to need to do that for yourself in your own practice, whether professional practice or personal practice of negotiation, and come up with the best way of understanding negotiation that you can. So these models will serve as examples from which you can pick and choose, you can borrow and steal, and you can add things on your own. While we're on the topic, I'd like to say a bit about using models. So once you've positioned yourself with a model, you know what happens in negotiation. When can you use this model? So you can use this model often, but you can use it primarily at 3 points in a negotiation. And one of them is during preparation for negotiation. If you read through any model of negotiation and use those elements as your key points for preparation, then you've got yourself a preparation checklist all laid out. In other words, if you're using the getting to yes model, and then you know that before you walk into a negotiation, I need to look at what are the interests that I have, and what is the positions that I've said. What are the interests that the other party have, to the best that I can discern them? What is the position that the other party has told me? So that's one element. The second element would be what might be some creative options that I might be able to put on the table, should circumstances be suitable. A third element would be what objective criteria might apply to this situation. What objective criteria can I think of that might help strengthen my own stance in this negotiation? Let's look at what the law says. Let's look at what the book value says. Let's look at what market practice is. Let's look at how everybody does things and see what supports me, and so on and so forth. So using elements as a tool for preparation. A second point at which we can use elements are in the middle of negotiation, when things seem to be going somewhat off track. We can call a break, or breaks might happen organically, kind of naturally, and we can think, well, what's going wrong? And as you practice doing this, you'll realize that you can do this without even taking that break. And the difference in using a model is that when you ask yourself, what's going wrong here? You will actually be able to name an element in which the thing is going wrong. In other words, instead of saying, I don't know, it's not working, so what's going wrong? What's going wrong is that it's not working. Instead, you'll be able to say, what's going wrong is that the other party has a very good batna, and therefore has very little motivation to reach an agreement with me. So by using our model to identify things specifically, to name things, we can use them to identify points in the negotiation that we're going to then need to address specifically. And finally, of course, we can do the same thing after a negotiation is over, and we're trying to we're reflecting on negotiation and trying to learn from it, either for the next round of this negotiation or for the next negotiation with someone else about someone else. Unless we know specifically to name specific things and check out how they worked in this negotiation, then our reflection on negotiation will be very, very general, as in, oh yeah, it went pretty well, or oh, I got what I wanted, or oh, you can't work with that guy. But if we have a checklist of sorts, if we have a bunch of names that we can give to things and say, so how did alternatives affect that negotiation? Or were creative options put on the table, or did everybody just focus on their positions? And we have that as kind of a roadmap for questions, then we know what to think about when we're reflecting on this negotiation and using it as a springboard for growth, looking forward to the next negotiations. Another time you might be using a model to reflect on a negotiation that has occurred in the past, and you're trying to understand what's gone wrong, is if you find yourself in the position of a third-party mediator to a negotiation you didn't take part in the first place. As a mediator, when you're walking into a failed negotiation, to a crash negotiation, one of the things you might be asking yourself is, well, what went wrong in these parties' negotiations the first time around? Why weren't they able to hold this conversation constructively by themselves. So what you will be doing is very much the same as what I've just recommended that every party to a negotiation do, which is, after the fact, go, take your model of negotiation and use it to go digging through different pieces of the negotiation and figure out what's gone wrong.